I was in Mark's office with 20 other people, and I'm presenting this whole strategy. And I made a comment, something to the effect of, if we do this half as well as we might, at some point we're going to have a responsibility. And Mark says, why? Peep's pissed, right? He's like, why? And I'm like, well, because we're actually going to be connecting people to all their favorite news sources and their friends to all their favorite news sources. And we're going to probably enable the world's largest echo chambers. There's a line of questioning kept with a why, like back and forth. And I kept answering with, rational reasoning, but we were doing what was best for Facebook.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. We have an absolute treat today. We have pretty much the Michael Jordan of the product management space. We have Mr. Michael Serda. I'm going to run through a quick list of his companies that he's worked at, and I'm definitely going to miss some because there's so many big ones. So we have MySpace, Facebook, Live Nation, Vivo. We have Goldman Sachs, Univision. Did I miss anything?
Disney.
At Disney. Oh, he also created Disney Plus, by the way.
That's a good memory, though. You're just going along with us.
I know. Yeah, I almost got them all. So, so when we were doing the pre-interview, it took him 3 to 4 minutes before he said, oh, actually worked directly with Mark Zuckerberg on some things on the Facebook news feed. I was like, wait, what? I had to scroll down on his LinkedIn like, oh, wow, he did. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I want to talk a lot about some of the things you did at those companies, but let's talk about real quick. Let's talk about product management, how you got into it, and then I kind of want to know your thoughts because you've been very adept at like bouncing industry to industry. So I kind of want to see, is that more of just a function of product management, or is that something? Were you doing something specific to be able to be adaptable like that?
Yeah. So I think, first off, like the role of product management is kind of misunderstood sometimes. So maybe to baseline there real quick, at least my edition of it is the role of a product manager is to define what to build, for who, over what period of time, and to what outcome. That's it. If that's all you take from it, you got it. Now, there's a lot of nuance to it as well, because in tech companies, the product lead is in charge of that whole area. They're like the mini CEO of that area. So like at Facebook, I was like the head of media product and Facebook Live, the live video feature. That was like, I kind of owned that for a while, right? So, whereas in a non-tech company, the product manager doesn't really own the business. They own the feature. They own how the product works. So it's a little bit different depending on where you go. And I think I in hindsight, everything just happened organically. I was always curious as to whether the craft would work in other industries. So I tried financial services. I went to Goldman Sachs. That was interesting because it was a recruiter that reached out and said, these guys are looking for somebody out of Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
And so I got that call, and I think I have the right level of patience because a lot of my brethren in other tech companies would never even bother because it's so not the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't cool.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, like what made you make that jump? I mean, we're going to get to kind of more specifics as far as the companies, but
it's funny. I think I was at Live Nation at the time, and I was, working on stuff, like when you buy a ticket for a sporting match or a concert or whatever, and you want to get rid of that ticket because maybe your plans changed or whatever. Or you bought it for a friend that's going with you and you want to transfer the ticket. So I built the feature that allowed you to transfer it from a phone to another phone, for example, or the feature that gets you into the concert with your phone, right? That was a new thing at the time. I was really working on something that I thought was much bigger, which was going to sort of cut the secondary ticketing market off at the knees. This is the StubHub, the SeatGeek, those kinds of things. I was gonna get to know you so well as a user, as a music fan or a sports fan. I was gonna let you in on the tickets before they went on sale. I was gonna give you a push notification on your phone.
Oh wow!
Because I know you like Beyonce, and I know you like to sit in the 200 level section, club level, and I know that you want to spend roughly $250 or $300, right? I'll give you that push notification before the on sale happens. Anyway, I was working on this, only to find out that Ticketmaster themselves, which are a part of Live Nation, didn't want to go that direction because that was going to upend the fastest growing part of their business, which is the secondary ticketing market, right? And this is all public information now, right? The way this is played out. So I was like, I'm kind of done with entertainment for a minute. And I was sort of hungover a little bit, I think, from that experience. And I wanted to do something completely different. And I actually had this recruiter called. I think they were the Diversa Partners guys. They're like a prominent executive recruiting firm. And they reached out and they said, we got one we want you to take a look at. And when they call, you take a look at it. And I'm like, I don't know anything about financial services. Like, I'm terrible with my own finances. Like, and the problem, and I realized this was the opportunity. The problem is nobody really teaches us how to do money, right? And if you maybe learned from your parents, it's outdated information by now.
Yeah.
If it was even the right information. And so our financial habits kind of mimic our environment. So we just do what we always know. So I saw that as an opportunity to go into Goldman Sachs and maybe try and fix that. And so we built, this thing called Marcus by Goldman Sachs, which is their consumer bank. And that's why they needed a consumer product guy, which was me. Mm-hmm. They didn't have, this place was so sort of behind in terms of having any digital infrastructure. There was not even a Macintosh in the building. Everybody had virtual PCs, like monitors. So I had to get Macs in the building. I had to get Figma in the building and Slack in the building, all these kinds of things, right? But I saw the opportunity to make an impact. And, we worked on things like the Apple Card. I don't know if you have the Apple Card. It's a great credit card. And that was a fun thing to work on. And some of the features in that card that make you use the card better and actually establish habits, the way you understand how you're spending, that was new then. A lot of the other banks have copied that since, but that was the kind of stuff I got excited about doing. And I was really anchoring it around this idea of the personal economy, your personal economy. Mm. And I think that's the thing about certainly consumer product management in general too, is it's very customer centric, right? If nothing, it's that. And so you're the voice of the customer. You own the customer journey. You're the one getting behind it to usher people to take that next best action, whatever it is.
Yeah. So, but before that, I mean, your first prominent product role was MySpace. Was that like during the rebrand? I remember I trying to piece together social network came out, so MySpace said we're gonna try it again. MySpace had already kind of tanked. And they said, we're going to try it again. First, they hired Justin Timberlake to be the figurehead of MySpace or something, right?
Right. So the way it went down was MySpace was owned by News Corp, right, which owns Fox and the Wall Street Journal, all these things. And so I had a startup. I was working on my third startup. I was the founding CEO of it. And that's really when I started getting into more product was when I was the founding CEO, because you have to, right? And this company was called Threadbox, the startup I had. And it was basically Slack before Slack. It was too early. Mm-hmm. And early, email wasn't broken for enough people yet, Yeah. So I was working on that, and I was selling it, selling the company, and I sold it to MySpace. And once we sold it to MySpace, we went in and created a new layer of messaging within MySpace. So if you remember how it was, they had instant messaging, they had mail, they had groups and forums, and we collapsed all those into one messaging layer. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I got to MySpace. And as part of going there, a lot of times when you sell your company to a bigger company, part of the deal is you go to work for them for at least some period of time. They call that an earn-out, because you're earning what you sold, right? You get some money up front, then you get some along the way, right, based on some accomplishments. So my team and I were there, and I ran product and technology for this area, and it was really fun because it was the first time that I was building products that were, going to millions and millions of eyeballs, and that was super fun because you could see analytics and data coming back, and actually you could see the impact of what you build and ship very quickly, so you get good signals, so you know how to then react and how to make changes and iterate. And I really loved that. And I think the Timberlake thing was a little bit later because what happened was News Corp decided to sell MySpace off. And this was funny because I had been at MySpace just long enough to know where the bones were buried. So I was thinking I might buy it.
Yeah.
So I was lining up investors and having conversations about trying to put a bid in. And the CEO at the time, who's a very famous entrepreneur and venture capitalist, his name is Mike Jones. He heard through the bankers that I was putting a syndicate together, and he was like, "Dude, what do you think? What are you talking about? Spinning this out and buying it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just thought I might give it a shot." And he's like, "Well, if you're going to do it, let's do it together." And I knew at that point I had to stand down because I couldn't go around my boss at the time, right, and make a play. And I knew he was interested in, I think, buying it, but I think I knew that News Corp probably didn't want to sell it to him. So at that point, it was kind of like, let's see how this goes. Well, the News Corp sold it to a company called Specific Media. There were these two brothers that had an ad business, and they brought Timberlake in as a partner.
Okay, so that's when he came in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, so that was right in Silicon Valley. MySpace was based there.
MySpace was actually based in Beverly Hills. So I was living in the Valley, and I would fly down, on Monday and fly home on like Thursday.
Really?
Yeah. That's kind of how each week went, and it was actually quite fun to. It was a nice change of pace to be in LA doing tech stuff, because in the Valley it had become so pedantic, and so it was refreshing to be like entertainment oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like living there? I mean, you were there through the heyday, right? 2000s.
In the Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to the Valley in the mid 90s actually. And it was just in time for what became the consumer internet. Right. And so I think my first 3 jobs in a row were all, they were all like what I refer to as arms dealers to the internet. So they were making routers and switches and software that actually became what we know as broadband today. So I was selling equipment that at the time, and I was software, and I was selling it to phone companies, internet service providers, and this was the backbone for that consumer internet. So. And it's funny, each of those 3 companies, I think 2 of them went public while I was there. And then one of them sold off to like Lucent Technologies, which was this big giant phone company. So I felt like I came to the right place at the right time. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, was it just like, just like living there during that heyday? The founders,
there's a certain culture. There's a certain like way things worked, and it's business, but you're not overly businessy. It's where the founder's wearing flip flops, instead of a suit.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit dressed down. There's a keg of beer on Fridays. The team all gets together and drinks a couple of beers together, and that's like a normal course of business. And it's very collegiate. Like a lot of the people became close because they were, in those days, I'm sure it's still the case now, but like in those days, especially like the whole startup scene in the Valley there was so much a culture and an ethos to it. And it was a very special place. And what would happen was these founders would galvanize these teams to look at a North Star together and recognize that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And once everybody's aligned to that, they start doing it for each other every day.
Yeah.
And it becomes sort of an unspoken accountability whereby it's like, I know you got my back because we got the same North Star. And what happens is if you go public or sell or do one of those activities, everybody's celebrating in that and participating in that because there's equity that you get in these companies.
Yeah.
And so
they all had pieces of each other's companies, you're saying? Or maybe a little bit? Or
No. So in a given company, for example, I worked at a company called Redback Networks, and we sold big routers to phone companies and ISPs. And so I had, as part of my compensation, equity in the company, stock options, right? And so what would happen is if we go public or we sell, that becomes realized, and all of my coworkers are in on the action. I think at that company, I think even the admin, the general admin that answers the phones and the front door person made $1 million on that stock. I mean, that's how wild it was.
Time.
And then a lot of people are making money for the first time in their lives, right? And so, they get they go all out and they get the Porsche, or I remember everybody's talking about their Porsche
Right.
at the time. It was a thing, and I got in on it too, man. I got to tell you, it was a fun time to be around, and it was a fun time to create value, and really, I learned so much about what it takes to build a team, and orient them toward value creation.
Yeah. So going back to the MySpace, at what point do you leave there for Facebook, right?
Actually, the funny story there is when MySpace was for sale, there was an investment banker that had put the book together, and the book is sort of like all about the company, and the different interested parties sign non-disclosure forms, and they start looking at the book, and Vivo was one of the companies that was thought to be the most likely acquirer of MySpace. So I reached out to a buddy that I knew, that knew the CEO of Vivo, and he introduced me. And he said, "You know what? We're actually looking for a head of product right now, so we'd love to talk to you about that."
Wow.
And I said, "Wait a minute, aren't you guys going to buy MySpace?" And he's like, "No, we're not." And so at that point, I just carried on with that recruiting experience, and went to Vivo. Mm-hmm. And it was timely because MySpace was in the process of getting sold. So what happens is when your startup gets bought by a bigger company, and then they get sold or something happens, a lot of times your contract gets broken, in which case your earnouts get liquid immediately, right?
Yeah, so it's time to leave.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Vivo, now by the end, MySpace became more music videos based, right?
Well, we were
kind of
heading
like aligns with Vivo, I guess, right?
We were heading down that road. Video was becoming prominent. YouTube was becoming very prominent. And I think the thing about MySpace is there was music rights, and not everybody had music rights. And the record labels had a joint venture with MySpace that was specifically called MySpace Music. And in that joint venture, part of the deal was rights to the music. Mm-hmm. So that we were trying to make the most of those rights, and that's where the videos came into play.
Yeah.
But Vivo was different because Vivo was actually owned by the record labels, by Sony and Universal. So they had the I think it was like 20,000 of the official videos. And so what happened, this is a funny story. Everybody used to go to YouTube to watch their favorite band videos, right? The record labels woke up and said, "Hey, wait a minute, those are our videos. Those aren't their videos." And so they, I think, threatened to sue YouTube. And this is what the music labels do. They threaten to sue, then they create a joint venture. Yeah. That's how it goes. And that's what happened. And the joint venture in the business deal became Vivo in that case. And so Vivo's big source of distribution was YouTube. Yes, we had Vivo.com, we had Vivo apps and all that stuff, but most of the traffic and the views were happening in YouTube.
Yeah. So what was like the revenue breakdown? I mean, was it because Vivo is obviously massive on YouTube. I mean, but on its own, what is it? Is it just kind of like the distribution of the videos, or?
Yeah. So what's interesting about the model that Vivo had back then was all the volume of views were happening on YouTube. So here's basically what would happen. Let's say, and I'll use an example from that era, like Lady Gaga had a video out, right? And that video would be on YouTube. It'd also be available on Vivo, but it's getting watched primarily on YouTube. But when we know, like, for example, Katy Perry's dropping a new video, what we'll do is we'll stunt it in a way that if you're watching that Lady Gaga video, we'll have it sort of a thumbnail next to the video that says Katy Perry premiere, whatever the song is. And the person's on YouTube, they click that video, they go to Vivo.
Wow.
Right. And so we were driving traffic and siphoning traffic off that way. And it was an ad supported model. So for every video you had a pre-roll a lot of times. And then a lot of times you had a post-roll as well. And what we tried to do is stitch it together so that if you were watching that Katy Perry video, we enabled this thing that's widely known now called continuous play. So one video finishes, another one starts. And if we know you like Katy Perry, we're going to show you something similar, right? It's a recommendation engine. And so we would do that. And we grew Vivo from, I think when I started, people were watching one video per session on average. and then they'd split. So I got them to register with their Facebook account back when that was still happening, and enabled continuous play, and did all kinds of other features to drive up that activity. So instead of people coming and watching one video and leaving, now they were staying and watching 10 videos at a time. Right. So you see the ad impressions increased tenfold just by doing and building the right product experiences that would enable a good experience, and in kind, more ads.
So like that's an example of a product you worked on was continuous play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which now everyone's like, what? Isn't that just automatic? No, someone had, like, we didn't always have that.
That's right. Kids. That's right. It used to start and it used to end.
Right. And then you'd have to go find the next video.
That's right. Yeah. And, there is this plethora of choice. And you see this still in music, audio streaming services like Apple Music or Spotify. A lot of times, you might have this yourself, but a lot of times people don't know where to start. Like, what do I even want right now? And this is why Spotify has like this feature now called DJX, which is like, it thinks it knows you. So it's gonna be like, yo, Chris, welcome. Here's a video, a song that you haven't heard in a while.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm down with this. Then another song plays and another. It's the same model.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I mean, Apple, I know obviously with the podcast side, they have to find you separately. Like Apple Podcasts is not very good at just like suggesting you, because someone watches a similar podcast. So like,
right. I feel podcasts are still things you have to go out and find yourself.
Yeah.
For some reason.
But that's why I like YouTube. Because, they'll link me to something. They want to keep you on that platform. They'll link me to similar podcasts or information. So
That's right.
Okay. So Vivo, you do continuous play, which again, like people are just like, well, yeah, of course. But it's like, no, we didn't have that. So
yeah. Well, I think the cooler thing actually was this thing called Vivo TV. And you remember, this was like back in like 2012 or so, when your Xbox started doing other apps, or PlayStation was doing other apps, or then there was Apple TV, there was Roku, all these other devices. Then you had smart TVs as well. So we knew we were going to build Vivo in those environments on those kinds of devices. And so I kind of thought with my team, we developed a hypothesis that said, okay, how's this really supposed to work? Are we expecting people to like turn the Apple TV on and start using a remote to find a video? That sounds lousy.
Yeah.
So we created this thing called Vivo TV. So when you hit the Vivo app, all of a sudden videos are playing. The only choice you have to make is genre. Do you want rock? Do you want pop? Do you want, the hits of today, whatever, country, R&B? And so you make that choice and you're done. And so that, remember when I mentioned earlier that we drove it to 10, from one video view to 10 in a session? This took it to 30 a session.
Wow.
Because it was more of a lean back environment, and people turn the TV on and they're cooking, they're doing whatever.
They're at a party and just, I mean, music video, you get the music and then it's some visuals for people. So I think
that's right.
That's how it's used a lot, right?
That's right. And it turns out that, the people that like to spend money on ads online, really like to do it in the connected TV environment. And that's still very big today. So there's this notion, it's called FAST channels, free ad-supported streaming television. FAST is what the acronym is. Very, very big thing now. Everybody's in it. I think Vivo was the first FAST offering.
Yeah. So where do we go from there, from Vivo?
Gosh, where do we go from Vivo? I think, what happened was, here's the deal. A lot of times in the media companies, media, like Vivo was a media company. If you're an executive, you have a contract. It's usually a 3-year thing. And this comes from like talent, how like an actor would have a contract,
or picture deal.
Right, exactly. Or like a sports player would have a contract. They started doing that for the staff too, it turns out. So anyway, I had a contract, and I was coming up to the end of it, and we were renegotiating what the next 3 years might look like. But I knew by then that I'm negotiating with the record labels. So I have to have something in my back pocket. I can't go in there and expect to get anything better done for myself otherwise, right?
They're ruthless.
Yes.
Famously.
Yeah. So I went, I think a couple of recruiters reached out, so I had a few leads on some things. So I was looking at Facebook. I was looking at Live Nation. I was looking at Churn and Entertainment as well. So I had three like really solid, opportunities, and I was very open with people as I was discussing what I was thinking about doing. And I like to be upfront. Some people like to keep it closed in. I like to be upfront about things because I feel like you're going to get closer to where you're trying to get to in the end if you are. Sometimes it backfires. And in this case, it did. I was a little too open about what I was thinking about doing. And I kind of negotiated myself right out of a job. Wow. And so I ended up, that's how I ended up going to Facebook. And it turns out Facebook at the time, I remember Vivo were actually renegotiating their relationship with YouTube. That deal was up. So we were renegotiating and we were considering doing a deal with Facebook instead and putting all the videos on Facebook. Mm. And can you imagine all the YouTube links that have been shared in Facebook over time? Yeah. I mean, it's got to be billions.
Oh yeah.
So we were going to take those links and we were going to repopulate them with the official video from us.
Wow.
Which would have been quite a move. It turned out that Vivo redid their YouTube deal anyway. But in that process, I got to know a lot of great people at Facebook. And they were really interested in putting video in the newsfeed. Mm-hmm. And so they brought me in to do that. And what was interesting about it is if you go to work at Facebook, you especially in the product or engineering area, they put you through boot camp. So you spend your first couple months just like going to different camps and learning how to be at Facebook. So by the time I got out of boot camp, my boss said to me, hey, we want to really prioritize putting news in the news feed. Would you mind working on that first? And I said, wait a minute, you hired me to do the video stuff. I just came out of Vivo. I know I'm like one of the only people that knows about video right now in this place. And they're like, yeah, we're going to give that to somebody else. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, does that resonate with you? And what am I going to say at that point? Right. I just got there. I just got out of boot camp. I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. Meanwhile, I didn't even watch the news. It bummed me out, if anything else,
What year was this about?
This was like probably 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So at that point, Facebook was crushing it with mobile ads. They were the only game in town, and they were doing super well. And what was happening was every few months, especially in those days, Mark would reprioritize what they're going to show you in the newsfeed. This is why over the years, it's been a little bit like this if you're a user, because one day you're seeing, cat pics, and the next day you're seeing pics of the barbecue your friends did or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're seeing news articles.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing, stuff about your favorite sports team. So my job became to maximize the time you spend in Facebook consuming media content. So not the friend pictures, not the friend stuff, not the user generated content, the actual media stuff. So this would be like news articles. It would be, anything coming from a celebrity, a politician, an actor, a movie, your favorite sports teams, all that kind of stuff. And so, the job really became to develop the strategy for how to amplify news in the news feed. Mm-hmm. And that was quite an experience. And I remember I was in Mark's office with 20 other people, and I'm presenting this whole strategy. And I made a comment, something to the effect of, if we do this half as well as we might, at some point we're going to have a responsibility. And Mark says, why? He was pissed, right? He's like, why? And I'm like, well, because we're actually going to be connecting people to all their favorite news sources and their friends to all their favorite news sources. And we're going to probably enable the world's largest echo chambers.
Yeah.
Why? There's a line of questioning kept with a why, like back and forth. And I kept answering with, rational reasoning. And because I think his perspective was that we were just plumbers of the information. And if we know that you like Fox and I like CNN, so be it.
Just keep feeding.
Yeah, Hey, what gets you to spend more time and thus more ads, right? So it wasn't, I didn't feel like we were thinking about people here. I thought we were thinking about business.
Yeah.
Right. And it's framed sometimes as thinking about doing what's best for people, but we were doing what was best for Facebook. Make no mistake. Anyway, we're in this meeting, working through this, and Sheryl Sandberg's there, and she walks over to me, and she puts her hand on my forearm, like a politician move. I think she grew up in politics or something. So she got the politician forearm hold, and she says, "Mark, let him finish." And she looks at me and she goes, "I'm so glad you're here." Because I'm like her age, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and we were like the adult, some of the adults at the time, right? And I think she was relieved that I was actually thinking about draft on impact of what this might be.
Right.
But guess what? Years later, now we know we did create the world's largest echo chambers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's why I say, it's definitely a for better or worse thing. Like it was great for the business, but it wasn't great for the world necessarily. And you know what's interesting about there's a lot of people that talk about like the FOMO that happens with people that, kids today, and some of the mental illness that's developed and some of the anxiety that's developed largely to social media in the way that works. One thing that I felt was really interesting was I felt like that working there. So meaning I was an outsider. I didn't grow up there. I was hired out of industry. And so I wasn't one of them. So, and when you work at Facebook, what happens is there's an internal version of Facebook that you use that only Facebook employees can see.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you're living in the app all day long.
Yeah.
You're posting up and all that stuff, and status updates are in there. And
so it's more focused on the business and aspects of Facebook, but you're posting in a Facebook. Oh, wow.
It's the same app, but once you're an employee, they flag you in the database, so you're now on the inside, and so the only way to post on the outside is to adjust a setting.
Wow,
which is pretty wild. But what was happening, and where I'm going with this is since I wasn't a part of the club, a lot of my peers and colleagues were, getting together over the weekends and going to wine country and renting these big houses and spending the weekend together, and they're posting all the pictures, and there I am looking at the pictures, having FOMO because I'm not included.
Right.
And so, I just thought that was a very interesting thing, that the impact on society, I felt myself being there. Isn't that kind of profound?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a microcosm of what you guys were doing to everyone.
Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, exactly.
What's up, guys? Hope you're enjoying the episode. Real quick, I just want to let you know we now have the Tech Career Accelerator for anyone that watches. We're going to get you a job via updating your LinkedIn, fixing your resume, running you through mock interviews, and I work with you until you get hired. So it is a 100% success rate. Check it out, link below. Thanks. Okay, so you helped with the live video feature. You kind of spearheaded that, right?
Yeah, so I was mentioning that I was in charge of like media-based content and feed. And what was happening was there were a couple of apps that people were starting to use out there that were doing live video. One of them was called Meerkat. The other one was called Periscope. And I think Twitter bought Periscope eventually. But since we were interested in driving up the time you spend on media content and a feed, what else could we do became the thing. And I suggested to one of my teams, because I had a few different teams that I managed, and I suggested to one of my teams that we get into that and develop a hypothesis around it. And it was a team of like a product manager, a designer, and 2 iOS engineers. And what we did there was essentially prototype an experience that only celebrities can use. And celebrities, we started bootstrapping it and basically reaching out to all these celebrities to start using it. And we had a pop-up media thing, kind of like this environment here inside of the Facebook office for like a week. And we would usher in celebrities to kind of bootstrap that feature and start using it. And what I loved about it was it was this tiny team working on this, and we tried it and it started working pretty well. And it was working so well because think about it. If I know you like Coldplay and Coldplay's going live, I can send you a notification, say Coldplay's going live. You're going to come into the app if you're not already there. And if you're there, you're going to jump into this and you're going to spend time on that. So there was just great mechanics to leverage there. And so so yeah, we started bootstrapping. I remember Ricky Gervais was like in his bathtub taking a bubble bath, doing a comedy bit to his phone. The Rock was doing a workout in his garage, his home, like, a gym, to his iPhone. Turns Chris Martin from Coldplay was singing "Fix You," like in his living room to a phone, an iPhone. And granted, it's not the best audio fidelity in the world, but it didn't matter because it was authentic and it was happening right now.
Yeah.
And it turned out that really resonated with people. So we started getting some traction with the feature. And then Mark laid down the law basically every December at the holiday break. Everybody leaves for, the week or whatever, and they come back in January. He usually has a new set of priorities because he's been mulling it over. And so that next January, I remember he declared the live lockdown. So if you weren't working on live, now you were. And the live lockdown meant, in that case, we were going to turn Facebook Live on for every single Facebook user. So not just celebrities now, every single Facebook user.
Yeah.
Which you can imagine how dangerous that could be, right? Who knows what somebody's going to do?
Yeah. There was a live stream murder. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was
a
decade ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched it, and it was a great success. And what I love about that story is it was about a small team thinking about what to build for who to an outcome. Mm. It was the crux of product management at play, and it was the crux of what good can happen and what good looks like when you empower teams that are closest to the action, right? In other words, this wasn't something that somebody said, "Hey, go do this," from the top down. It came from the bottom up, and that's the best.
Yeah. Give me some interesting insights about Facebook, and I'll kind of like elaborate a little bit. Like, for instance, like I think at one point Netflix did some deal with Adam Sandler, and then within a month they were like 6 billion Adam Sandler hours of watch time have already been consumed. Like, was there anything crazy like that? Like, for instance, I know there was something actually wild with Facebook where it was something like the biggest like Black Lives Matter group and the biggest like white people group or something were run by the same Australian man. Like, anything wild like that you recall? Insights, data, anything?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a hard one to come up with. I mean, there were lots of like, big moments and big like wow, things. I mean, look, we had, I think at the time, 3 billion people on the service. 3 billion people. And, you don't meet too many people in your life that built something that billions of people actually use. So I think it was just a phenomenal data set. I think one of the things that kind of blew us away was the time spent on Facebook became more than the time you spent on TV.
Yeah. Right around that time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this is when you start to see clues about the future, right? And now we're in a future where, guess what? TV's not really TV anymore. Like TV, who turns on the TV and watches TV? Maybe for a sports match. Yeah. I think the Knicks are playing tonight, by the way. Hopefully they can get this one out. I don't know if you saw the
It's crazy,
wild. But you watch TV for that, but like most of the time you're watching streaming services, right? So that's kind of the future of, and it's funny the way TV works, right? Because it's like it goes in cycles. It unbundles and spreads out, then it bundles, then it unbundles and it bundles. It's just back and forth.
Yeah,
and we just happen to be at that point where it's unbundled right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of like we're at the point where you're watching TV, but then you're following along on X or it's Facebook too for some people.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is a lot of people always think about. There's a lot of companies and folks and a lot of product managers try and merge those worlds together. So like, if they know you're watching a soccer match on a streaming service or something, what can you do on your phone that's connected to the match? So there's a lot of effort goes into that, trying to tether those surfaces. But what I've learned time after time is people don't really want that. People want that to be there. They want this to be here doing this. They don't want to merge those worlds. There's a reason they're separate.
Yeah. Well, I think some TVs will have your feed on the side, which like is garbage. If I want to read it, I'll look at my phone. If I want to watch the TV,
1,000,000%. I mean, then that's one of the things I learned at Vivo, by the way, because I had all these ideas to put all this stuff around the video, like biographies, images, news articles, all kinds of crap, to drive more time spent and that's therefore more ads. Everything I launched, it flopped because I was getting in the way of the video. So the number one takeaway there was stay out of the way of the content.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And it's easy for us to understand as consumers now.
Yeah.
Right. We know we don't want this. Right.
But back then you just figured, well, of course this will be better.
Right. Exactly.
They'll their feed on the TV.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
actually.
It sounded good at the time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But now people are like, well, of course you don't want that.
Exactly.
But yeah. I mean, that's kind of the fun part of your job is figuring that stuff out, right?
Well, and that's the name of the game is experimentation. It's iteration. You never know until you try something, and data always will prove out, right? And then that will always tell you the truth. Absent the use of that and that kind of rigor, you're in the world of subjectivity.
Yeah.
Like I kind of feel how many times I've been in meetings, I feel that it's like, okay, I don't care how you feel. Let's see what the data says.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
does it back it up?
Right. And this is why you want to test things. You want to build the smallest, in the business, they call it the MVP, the minimum viable product. So you want to build that for the smallest audience in the smallest corner just to get some signal.
Yeah.
Right. And once you get that signal, it informs the roadmap in terms of where you take it.
Yeah. So then at what point, so you mentioned the Live Nation work, you mentioned the Goldman Sachs work. At what point does the big mouse tap you to run Disney Plus? I mean, you helped launch the entire product. Right?
Yeah. This was wild. I remember I was at Goldman Sachs. We were working on the Apple Card, and a retained recruiter, SPMB, reached out to me, and Disney were looking for somebody to come and lead product management. And I was into it, and I thought it would be fun to go back to working on video again because I was doing financial services, kind of boring compared to video, right? But I was trying to make it fun. And we were about to launch the Apple Card, and I wanted to stick around for that. So I politely declined to get into the process with the recruiter. And I said, I'm really in the middle of something right now. Maybe in a few months if you're still on the search. They were still on the search a few months later.
Yeah.
And Goldman had given me a new boss all of a sudden. And I wasn't really into it. And so I thought, I'm going to go see what this Disney thing is all about. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. And I got into it. And it turned out that the Walt Disney Company acquired a streaming company called BAMTech. And BAMTech was in the business of building video streaming apps for third parties. So like, I think they built something for the WWE. I think they built the first HBO Go, or one of those earlier versions of the HBO video series. And they did that kind of work. So they were very project oriented. Well, Disney acquires them to become the streaming division because there's this big bet to build Disney Plus.
Yeah. So
they brought me in because they needed a lead product person to lead that team and build it out. And so that's what I did. I joined and I inherited a great group of folks and hired some additional folks that I'd worked with in the past and put them all together. And we got that thing built in, I think, it was like less than a year. And I remember launching it to the point of launching small first. I kept advocating that we do a beta for Disney Plus, like a small private beta, to just test, make sure the pipes are working. Video's tricky. There's a lot of features that you got. Search, you got you got to log in. You got all the different features that you can imagine.
Things you take for granted.
You just take.
But someone like you does not.
Right. Right.
It's really hard to get a login.
Yeah. Every single one of those things got to work together. And I remember I convinced leadership to let us launch in one country. And so we launched it in the Netherlands first. The Netherlands was great because there's a high broadband penetration there and a broad array of device usage. And so when I say devices, I mean the different kinds of phone models, the different kinds of, whether it's Roku, Apple TV, all those different things. So we tested it, and it went really well. I think we found like 200 bugs. I remember having this Google sheet of like each bug, what it was about, and when it was going to be fixed. And I had to show that to our president and run through that.
Were you presenting to, was it Eisner at the time?
Bob Iger was the CEO.
Bob Iger. Okay.
Bob Iger, yeah. No, I wasn't presenting to him directly. I was presenting to a guy called Michael Paul, who was the president of streaming. There were a couple times I did meet Bob when we launched Disney Plus right around launch time to the public. They invited a bunch of press to come onto the Disney campuses in Burbank. So I was down there for that, and these press came in into this. It was like a private miniature theater right near his office, and people came in and they got to watch part of the first episode of Mandalorian.
Yeah,
which was really cool at the time, right?
Which is massive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Set the thing off. Right?
Yeah. Well, so we're watching and a bunch of press people, and Bob comes in, and he's so cool, man. He's got this like cardigan sweater on. He just walking in and goes, I thought I should come in and say hello. And it was just like, he just owned the room. Like the panache this guy had was second to none.
Yeah.
And he just hung out. He stood in the corner while we all watched The Mandalorian in that room. So I remember when we launched Disney Plus, though, probably the week after that, we were up late. We launched it late at night, and it was a rolling launch. So like it would go out on the web first, and then it would go on to iOS devices. Or right, there's a certain order of events to make sure everything's working, because you do these, you launch, you do the smoke test. If all's good, you keep going.
Keep going.
So this was in the wee hours of the night. So I remember it was probably 1 a.m. I'm in our offices in San Francisco at the time. That's where we did the launch. We kind of conducted the launch from, and I was watching on this big screen the analytics of what was happening. There's this video analytics company called Conviva, and they basically show you the real time, like who's watching what where in the world, right? So I started to see that we all of a sudden had like millions of people watching, which means millions of people transacted. They joined our free trial, put a credit card number in, right? So that's millions of people within hours are watching, and you see the most heavy watched thing immediately was the Mandalorian episodes 1 and 2, because we launched with those 2 episodes. That was one of the big things people were sort of starved for, that content. And I think there was some animated Disney stuff too. Like I want to say it was like not Snow White, but like I forget what it was. But anyway, it was cool just to watch all that. And we're having champagne, and we're all fired up. It's like now like 3:30 in the morning. So I decide I'm going to go walk to my hotel around the corner and get some sleep. And so I go to the hotel, and I'm asleep for like maybe 40 minutes. My boss calls me, and he goes, "Hey, Serta, have you heard?" I was like, "What? We're down." I'm like, "Oh shit." I'll be right over. So I throw my pants on. I go back to the office, and we're all gathered because the service is degrading. What was happening was, as you launch the app, you know how you see all the tiles of the content to choose from?
Yeah.
They started disappearing one by one. So it was degrading.
Nightmare.
Yeah. It was literally falling over. And so I think by like 8 or 9 in the morning, the whole service was down, and we got it back up like a couple days later, but it was like intermittent, and it wasn't working that well. So it took a good few weeks to get things stabilized.
What was the problem?
Well, the problem was interesting. What everybody called the search API, right? Okay, this is how this works, right? You got all these apps. As consumers, we use these apps, but behind the scenes, absent the apps are talking to back-end services through an API layer, right? And so the search API had failed. Well, it turned out that the engineering team, who were monsters, they were amazing, but I think it was a very small engineering team that worked on the search API, and it turns out there was more than search in that API. There was recommendations, there's like all kinds of other stuff piled in there. usually you like these things to be more distributed. This is where the term microservices comes into play. You like these things to be more distributed so that if something goes down, it doesn't affect the other thing. In this case, all these things were like thrown into this one API layer. And so that's why it took everything down. So it was crazy. I remember, so that next day, probably 10:30 in the morning, we're in a conference room and we've got Kevin Mayer, who was the divisional head in Burbank, and Bob Iger was on the line too. And it wasn't a friendly call.
No, no, because I mean, what a home run of a launch with the Mandalorian, everyone's signing up because the whole back catalog.
That's right.
And then boom.
Well, and if there's good news to be had, though, it's that I think we were able to spin it a little bit. Like we've done so well on day one with 10 million subscribers, 10 million people, more than ever projected or expected. So we crashed.
Yeah.
We did so well, we crashed. It's the old crashing the server problem.
Yeah. Did Iger buy that?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so.
No.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like? I mean, obviously, I mean, you're working on products that Zuckerberg has his full power behind. So it might not be totally foreign to you, but I mean, they diverted a lot of money from creating new parks, which is just a cash cow for them, to this streaming service. They want to be the new Netflix. It was just like blank checks to do what has to be done. I mean, what was that like?
Well, yeah, there was a ton of incredible support and a lot of really smart strategic work that went into that. Like all of the content rights, all of the content catalogs that were acquired, like because it wasn't just Disney. And it wasn't just, it was Star Wars. It was the Star Wars universe. It was the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Of course, Pixar. And we threw Nat Geo in as well for some reason. But we had a good breadth of stuff. And one thing I thought was cool, one of the cool things I was kind of really pleased about with our design team was the information architecture that was used. So when you launch Disney Plus, you have at the very top center, they call that the hero in the business. And the hero is going to rotate through the biggest things happening right now, right? Then you'll have all the rows of content. Well, the next row but beneath the hero were what we call brand tiles. So you had the Disney brand tile, the Pixar brand tile, the Star Wars, the Marvel, the Nat Geo. So we were able to sort of parse out the content that way for people to be able to come in and go, because it turns out the Star Wars people a lot of times are very different than the Marvel people.
Yeah.
So they want to go into those worlds. So let them, right?
Basically a massive streaming. There were 5 or 6 massive streaming. It was like a Netflix.
That's right.
In just Marvel, in just Star Wars.
It was a great way to organize the content so that it wasn't hard to find what you wanted to watch.
Yeah.
In video streaming services, one of the big important things you try to do by design is to reduce the time it takes for people to find something to watch. We call that the time to watch metric. And I think last I heard it's around 7 minutes these days is the average. And that's a long time. Yeah. And the longer it takes, the more likely it is people aren't going to make any choice, right? And they're going to just go do something else. So you want to make sure you're doing the kinds of things from a discovery perspective to make it easy to find something quickly.
Yeah, but now with these streaming, we're going to talk about Univision, but like kind of some of the lessons you learned to implement there. But with the streaming services, like the UI just has to be dialed in because I always say with Netflix, it's more fun to play with the menus, and then you click on one of their shows, and they're mostly kind of mediocre for the most part. Were you just hiring the best UI people in the country? Did they just say like, go get the best UI people? The UI and Disney Plus UI is fantastic. So were you just getting killers all over the place?
Yeah, well, and a lot of them were there before me. I remember. So my boss was this guy. He's a great friend called Gerald Jimerson, and he had a design team that he had hired. It was run by this guy called Ola Lufjens, and he was a wonderful design leader. So he was my partner. And so, again, in the division of responsibilities, the product person literally writes down and defines what to build for who over what period of time, how it works, all that stuff, all those mechanics. The designer interprets that into something that we can all look and feel. right? And so it's a very close partnership, and it's really hand in hand. And there's also UX research that happens where you show like 50 people something before anybody else, before you even build it. Like you just design a prototype, you show it to 50 people, you get signal, right? And that's what you want. You want signal to better inform what you're going to invest in from an engineering perspective. But yeah, absolutely world-class designers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it shows too, like I mean, 10 million on day one, because that content library is probably second to none.
Yeah.
Honestly. I mean, it's much better than Netflix.
Well, and I think while I was there, we got it to like over 100 countries internationally and 100 million subscribers.
Jeez.
And I think I realized that getting to 200 million subscribers, that journey was not going to be as fun.
Yeah.
Because once you're there in market, there's this BAU, this business as usual mindset that can get into play, and you focus less on prioritizing for the subscriber and more on prioritizing for the business. So that's when you're doing more distribution deals, you're doing more bundle deals, right? And that work just isn't as fun for a creative.
Yeah, because it's pretty set.
Yeah,
I mean, Disney Plus hasn't changed that much since when you started.
That's right.
So you get a little bored, and then when does Univision come into play? When you realize, like, okay, this challenge is it's going to be.
Well, and I also noticed that, the internal company politics had become clear to me as to how they worked, and I was like, it's probably time to do something else anyway. So another retained recruiter happened to reach out, James & Co., a small boutique firm out of New York. And they reached out about Univision. Univision's plan was to build a streaming service. And you got to know, like, I'm half Mexican. So when I was a kid in LA, I spent a bunch of time with my grandparents who were Mexican. So they always had like the Spanish TV station on that eventually became Univision. And so all of that content in their catalog, I was exposed to as a kid. And of course, my grandparents aren't alive anymore, but I always knew that they would kind of get a kick out of the fact that I got to that point.
Right.
Right. And I felt like there was something cool there for me to do and to bring the Spanish language population, like more of their work, their stories. I felt some mission behind that. And so, in the big plan was, start building a streaming service. We were gonna merge with Televisa, which is basically the big. You can think of Televisa as sort of like the Paramount of Mexico, right? Where they have TV stations and they have like all these businesses and cable businesses and all kinds of stuff. So Univision merges with Televisa, combines all the assets, the teams, the catalogs, and we launched a streaming service called VIX, VIX. You wouldn't know about it unless you were trying to watch Spanish language TV.
Yeah.
But we had movies, series, news, sports. We did a ton of soccer.
It's live soccer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So what happened was I had 9 months of runway to build this thing. And we were going to launch first with an ad-supported service, free with ads. And then subsequent to that, the plan was to launch a subscription tier. So I had to build this thing fast. So I was taking some of the Televisa people, some of the Univision people that were there. I hired a bunch of people myself. I basically called all the people I'd ever worked with in video. And because I was running, my role was running product design and engineering this time. This is one of the things that was attractive to me. Whereas at Disney, I was just doing product.
Yeah.
And I was in a matrix working with the other groups. At Univision, I was going to be able to work all those functions and really harmonize them. And so that was a lot of fun. I hadn't done that since Vivo. So that was really fun. So I basically hire all my friends and we get at it and we knock this thing out. And we launched it in 9 months in record time. We did a World Cup where there were 3 million simultaneous viewers. And we were so freaked out about that because by then we learned that leadership in the company, understandably, didn't have a lot of patience if there were bugs or outages or those kinds of things. So you got to be airtight, but it's hard to be airtight when you've only been at it for 9 months. And these things take time to harden. And when you're getting something to market in 9 months, you're kind of cutting some corners along the way just to get to market, and knowing that you're going to have to come back and do this other stuff to prop it up in more ways. And that's all the name of the game, though. It's part of the deal. It's part of the business. It's part of how it goes. So I grew this team from like probably 15 people to 500 people.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was a big run. And we launched it. We got it to 50 million monthly active viewers on the free service and about 10 million paying subscribers. Launched in 19 countries. So very, very proud of that work. That was a great time. I was there about 3.5 years.
And why move on? And then let's talk about the book a little bit.
Yeah, I think I started working on a book like 15 years ago, and I'm starting and stopping. And in the last year leading up to my leaving Univision, I was getting further fidelity on what the book was going to be. So I was starting to focus more on it. And there was sort of some natural restructuring happening in the company, and you know, the CEO that brought me in had left. So it was a changing moment of time, and it just felt like the right time, and it worked out time-wise. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to spend time on getting a book out there and talking about it and hustling it a little bit, because I felt like there's some important takeaways here that I wanted people to know. And so what I've been doing for the last few months is essentially talking to great people like you, talking about the book, going to conferences and talking about it, and really trying to sort of spread it out a bit. I'm doing some advisory as well, and that's been fun to just advise companies along the way, various startups, lots of AI stuff. There's some AI financial stuff that I'm looking at, helping a company. I'm helping another company with like an AI doctor. So it's cool stuff. So it's a great time for me to sort of step back and take some time, get this out there, talk to people, kind of enjoy myself. I'm a musician, so I'm working on another record right now. So I look at 2025 as let's call it a creative year.
Yeah.
And but mind you, that's after 30 years of nonstop hustle.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and launching some massive global products that everyone knows.
Yeah.
So who should check out the book? Is it people in product management thinking about going to product management? I mean,
what's interesting about it is, look, I think at its core, it's a product management book, but it's not about frameworks. It's not about how to build products, really. It's more how to think about it. And each story, it's in chronological order throughout sort of my career. And at the end of each story, and I get into this stuff about the meeting with Mark and all that stuff, that's all in there. In fact, the book opens with that story. It's sort of like when you see these movies where the first scene is an action scene and then they go 72 hours earlier.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those moves. And, you know, look, I think it's non-product people that have read it have really enjoyed it because they don't understand what product really is, but what they do understand is a real life story.
Yeah.
And a real life dynamic. And I think there's just some arcs in the storytelling that get at tugging on a little bit of one's emotions and curiosity and mindset. And so I think there's just enough of that to keep it going. And at the end of each chapter, as I say, there's like a list of like the key takeaways. And there's a lot of reflection in there because look, when you do these kinds of jobs that I've done, like where you're the head of product someplace, it's a lonely place sometimes to be because, you know, you're at odds with everybody. Because this is something I tweeted a million years ago when I was still using Twitter, where product is like sex. Everybody thinks they do it well. Imagine that, right? So you're in a room with people. You're the real product person. Everybody else thinks they are.
Yeah, because they use it.
They use it.
They'll show you. They'll teach you.
Again, you get into the land of the subjective very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's about managing a lot of that stuff. And guess what? Sometimes that doesn't work out well. Sometimes it goes south. I told you the Live Nation story earlier today. That was a sad ending, and I look back at it and I go, you know what? The truth is I had a role to play in that too. Mm. So this isn't, there aren't boohoo stories that way, right? It's very reflective, and it's very like, okay, this is how it went down. Believe me or not, this is how it went down. But here's what you should take away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, any last words for people looking to get into product? We're gonna have all the links for the book and how can they find you as well?
Oh, so I'm all the social media. I'm on IG. I'm certified. Facebook, you could find me there. Certainly LinkedIn. That's where you and I met, on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So I'm in all the places. I guess the last thing I might say is the lead that's buried in this story really comes down to you'll never know everything you could know about yourself unless you embark and actually build something.
Mm. Wow. Profound words.
Yeah, well.
Well, awesome. Yeah, once again, guys, we're going to have all the links. You can check out the book. You can connect with Michael. We'll have everything down below. And Michael, thanks so much for making this happen. He flew in, last night or this morning?
Yeah, it came in 2 nights ago. It's great to be in Miami. You give me a great reason to come down here.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy we made this happen. Yeah, we were going to do remote, but I said we got to get this guy in person to tell some of these stories. So thanks so much, and we'll catch you guys next time.